Crowhill here. Today we review a Kolsch and discuss cosmic horror. Hello and welcome to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Good evening, Pigweed.
Good evening, Crowhill.
What's on your mind?
Cthulhu.
Cthulhu.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, you see, it's time for P&C's shortcut to the classics.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, where we read great books by the world's great authors so long as they aren't too long.
Yes, we like to keep it under 100 pages. And for this show, we check out a pair of short stories by HP Lovecraft.
Yes.
The Shadow Over Innsmouth and Call of Cthulhu.
Aha, okay. Well, very good. But since we're doing our literary book, we actually need some help here.
Yes, we do. Our literary contributor.
All right.
All right. Woo!
Longinus.
Longinus. Cheers.
Right.
Cheers.
Yes, so this is October, our scary book.
Scary month.
It's a scary month. Yes, so this time last year we did a bunch of Poe stories.
Yeah.
And went to
Went to the Poe Museum, yes.
And the year before that we did what? Frankenstein.
Yeah,
We did
Frankenstein.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
That's right.
So yes, so this scary month is Lovecraft.
And it's plenty scary.
It's pretty scary. And we have a dark and scary beer to go with it.
So what do we got here? This is from Baltimore.
Yes. It's
Dark Usher.
It's got Edgar Allan Poe's face on it. Yes, and a year ago we did Fall of the House of Usher.
Yes.
And the name of this beer is Dark Usher.
And it's a dark Kolsch style, which is strange because Kolsch isn't usually dark.
Not at all. So
let's see. What do we got? I think it's interesting to note that this is a regular beer. That it actually is a real beer.
yes, it is.
We've finally gotten past
Yes,
our review of the no alcohol
we did
beers.
12 straight no alcohol beers, and now,
that's scary.
Scary. It's dark, spooky.
It's got a nice dark flavor
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, I don't know what's Kolschy about it.
Yeah.
Because usually there's a crisp Pilsner-like
Yeah.
taste to the finish on it that I think you kind of lose when you darken it up.
I think so, because a Kolsch is a German ale, but it's fermented at low temperatures, and you're right, it has a lagery type of a finish to it, but it's totally lost in this.
Yeah, what's
dark beer.
what's in the black lager? What's the name for a?
Gosh.
It's a German name.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Okay,
So it's kind of that
more like
reminds
that.
me of
Yeah, right. All right. Well, it's delicious. I'm going to have to get some of this.
Yeah, it is
Dark
good.
Dark Usher.
Dark
All right.
Usher.
Okay, so what order are we doing these books in?
Well, I want to do Shadow Over Innsmouth first,
Okay.
and finish with the biggie,
Okay.
the Big Cthulhu. However, before we get started, I want to play the opening paragraph, because this guy reads better than I do. The opening paragraph of Cthulhu, because it could be the opening paragraph of the introduction to the Lovecraftian world.
Okay.
So let's just see
Seems appropriate. So
Let's
we're going to
see
do
how
real
this
high
goes.
tech here and just play this right
Yeah.
into the microphone. Go ahead.
The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But someday, the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein. We shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age.
Wow. Yeah, when I read that really struck me, and I was listening to it, not that recording, but a different recording. I listened to it again, it struck me.
Yeah.
And I thought the interesting thing about it is if you were to contrast two views, one view says if you had the opportunity to peer into reality itself, you would find joy and beauty and order, and it would be amazing.
Right.
And then H.P. Lovecraft's view is if you could get past our ignorance and this lovely blindness that we live in and peer into reality itself, you would find horror and madness and death and destruction.
Right. You would run away and die, or go mad, and yes,
or go mad and then die, or something.
Yeah. So that paragraph opens this story, but he's just all of his stories in general are the times that this horrible, frightening world reaches in and touches us,
Right.
or we bump into it,
Yes.
or we accidentally reveal it.
Yeah, it's a fairy story in a way, because a fairy story is when you get out of your own world and you're into the fairy world.
Yeah.
So this is a fairy world. It's just a horror fairy world.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's no cosmic battle between man and monster. I mean, we can't even comprehend what their motivation is, what their morality is, and there's no competition here.
Yeah.
You just, if you run into this world,
You're gonna die.
you're just gonna die.
It's just bad.
And if they don't kill you, you'll just kill yourself. So before Lovecraft, horror was he was a big fan of Poe,
Okay.
but there's a lot of witches and ghosts and spirits and that kind of thing. He introduced space and science into horror. So cosmic horror is kind of a term that people use.
Although there's not a lot of spacey stuff in either of these stories.
That's true. But Cthulhu comes from outer space.
Right,
The
yeah.
deep ones come from space.
Right.
So that's sort of what he's credited with, sort of sci-fi fiction.
Okay.
Something
Sci-fi
alien,
horror, yeah.
Sci-fi horror.
Yeah.
Alien and that kind of thing.
Right.
But he wasn't very popular in his
No.
lifetime, right?
Yeah, you wonder how.
Yeah.
When people do. I was watching a show on Van Gogh the other day.
Yeah.
Like, how do you keep going?
Yeah.
Committed to your art when nobody's really that impressed.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're like, no, this is still my thing.
Yeah.
And you're poor and nobody thinks it's very good. That's
Well,
all right.
you know what?
Just keep going.
Once we die, this podcast is going to take off like crazy.
So, all right. If we happen to fake our own deaths, cut that out.
Yeah,
Edit that out.
Edit that out. Producer, edit that out.
I would just like to say before we begin, I would have bet you $100 that Lovecraft was British and not American. When I
Some of the
read that he was
spellings are
American,
British. Every once in a
Yeah.
while, you run across a British spelling in there.
I would have said no.
Yeah.
I thought he was straight from the island.
That's good. In listening to the one reader that I was listening to for Shadow Over Innsmouth, for a bunch of his stories, he's English and it just seems right.
Yeah, for whatever reason, some of the words had English spellings. Let's see if I can find
Why does
a
he
couple.
say shoe and shooed for show and shown?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Where does that come? I didn't even know that was an English sound, or I don't know where that comes from.
I don't know.
But it's in all of his stories. It's shoe for show. I don't know what that. All right, how about a little bit about his life?
Sure, okay.
Born in 1890, Providence, Rhode Island. Basically lived his whole life there. His dad went mad when he was little. Died in an insane asylum. Turns out to be onset of untreated syphilis.
Okay.
Raised by his mom. Then he had a nervous breakdown in high school. Didn't finish high school. One of our many writers who didn't.
I know.
Some of them finished high school, didn't go to college. Some didn't even finish high school.
I know. It's pretty amazing.
So anyway, big reader. Didn't try his fiction until say 1917. He gets married, moves to New York, which was terrible for him. He and his wife split up. He produces nothing that's great. When he goes back to Providence, that's when the big his big output takes place, and then he gets intestinal cancer and dies at 46 or something like that.
Right.
And, so yeah.
What did the HP stand for?
Yes, Howard Phillip.
Okay.
Interesting name. So Weird Tales, which I think is still around, isn't it? So this is back in the 20s. That was
the magazine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So that's sort of where the only place he really published anything.
Okay.
Or at least that was the biggest audience he ever got was Weird Tales.
Okay.
And it wasn't a reputable magazine at all, right? It was just a pulp. Yeah.
Okay, good. So,
yeah, all right. So Shadow.
Let's get into Shadow Over Innsmouth.
1931.
There actually is an Innsmouth, but it's not where he's placing it. It's in Mexico.
So, sort of like Faulkner, Arkham, Miskatonic University.
Yeah, he makes up some stuff.
Is these towns all come up over and over again, so it's in New England.
Yeah.
But
And Innsmouth sounds like a New England town.
Yes, I think.
And
Ipswich
Miskatonic University
is
sounds, Indian names and all that
right.
stuff. So yeah,
Miskatonic sounds good.
right.
So we've got an unnamed narrator just telling the story of Innsmouth. And
Yes.
What's he doing?
Yeah, so he's on this trip going around, just like he's on the summer break in college or something like that.
He's from the Midwest. He's from like Cleveland or something. Yeah. But his family is all from the East.
And he's going to Oberlin, I think, and he's on a break. And he's just traveling around, and he wants to. He doesn't want to spend too much money, so he's taking buses instead of trains when he can. And he finds out he's looking at architecture, and he's looking at different things.
Genealogical
research. Apparently his grandfather had some similar interests or something like that.
He was an antiquarian.
There you go. That's how they'd say it.
A young antiquarian.
So he finds out about this town where. The locals really hate it,
and everybody's going.
Don't go there.
You don't really want to go there.
Yeah.
And one guy says, "Look, if you get to 8, there's a 10 o'clock in the morning. There's an 8 o'clock. Get out in the evening. You don't go tonight. Go in the morning.
Yeah.
And then get out."
There's only one hotel, and it's kind of spooky. And people who stayed there in the past have had these kind of bad experiences.
One rickety bus that goes there. And so he's like, all right. He's got some sense of adventure and the fact that nobody wants to go there. Well, maybe I'll just go see why.
Yeah.
Get the heck out.
He says, I have an odd craving to whisper about those few frightful hours in that ill-rumored and evilly shadowed seaport of death and blasphemous abnormality.
That's just a little taste of Lovecraftian
prose.
Right.
Yes.
Well, let me just stop for 1 second. We're talking about the guy who pushes on even though nobody thinks his writing is great.
Yeah.
This is at the time of sparse writing. This is really the time of Hemingway, where you're stripping. This is
29, 30?
Yeah, this is 30.
Right.
So this is his writing style is it's closer to Melville from a few decades earlier. It's not a fashionable writing style anymore.
It's not quick.
No, it's
he, especially when he's talking about something horrible, he takes his time.
Yes, I've heard it described. I saw a show on him by a current horror, Guillermo del Toro, and he referred to it as Baroque.
Okay.
I'm like, sort of gaudy, sort of, right?
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Yes. So he finds out about this awful place, and he pulls up. He decides to take the bus. You want to hear about the bus driver?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the first time you get a sort of a description of what he's getting into.
Yeah. His age was perhaps 35, but the odd deep creases in the sides of his neck made him seem older when one did not study his dull, expressionless face. He had a narrow head, bulging, watery blue eyes that seemed never to wink, a flat nose, a receding forehead and chin, and singularly undeveloped ears. His long, thick lip and coarse-pored, grayish cheek seemed almost beardless, except for some sparse yellow hairs that straggled and curled in irregular patches, and in places seemed queerly irregular, as if peeling from some cutaneous disease. His hands were large and heavily veined, and had a very unusual grayish-blue tinge. The fingers were strikingly short in proportion to the rest of the structure, and seemed to have a tendency to curl closely into the huge palm. As he walked toward the bus, I observed his peculiarly shambling gait and saw that his feet were inordinately immense. The more I studied them, the more I wondered how he could buy any shoes to fit them.
Right. So there's many references to the Innsmouth look.
Yes.
So.
And people had it in various degrees, and this guy had it to some extent. And when I read that paragraph, my first reaction was, "Gosh, this guy's observant." You see some odd-looking fellow, and you stop to say, "Boy, his ears are small, and his hands are." That's really detailed observation.
Well, he was on the bus for a while. He gets into town, and it's
a rickety old bus. There's like 3 or 4 people on it.
Yeah.
No, because none of the people in the other town, what is it, Arkham, where he comes from?
Yeah.
Even want to take the bus. Yeah, they don't want to get on this bus at
nobody
all.
goes to.
Nobody goes to Innsmouth. So he comes into Innsmouth, and it used to be a prosperous place. There was good fishing, and there was other industry going on there, and it has a fantastic skyline. Nice towers on the buildings, and
Deepwater Harbor.
right. It looks like a very nice place, but it's run down.
Right.
And there's another odd thing, which is that all the churches have been taken over by some strange cult.
Right. So
All the churches in the
yes,
town.
So so there's no the churches are left. There are no old people
Yeah.
around. Only young people, and up to this bus driver, what he said was maybe 35, but looking older.
Yeah, but somehow these people seemed more disquieting than the dismal buildings, for almost every one of them had peculiarities of face and motions which I instinctively disliked without being able to define or comprehend them.
Right. So there's a kid working in a drugstore.
Yeah, a normal kid who doesn't live in the town.
He doesn't live in the town.
Yeah.
He just got moved there. He talks to him for a little bit. He's just trying to get the lay of the land, and
Yeah.
gets a little bit of a hand-drawn
It's a map. Right, yeah.
And what makes him seek out the Zadok?
Yeah, so he'd heard some scary stories, and I'm not sure he actually sought him out. I think he knew about him, and then when he saw him, he went to speak
Yeah, the
with
kid
him,
from the
right?
drugstore.
Kid from the drugstore talked to him
That's
about
the
it.
guy that'll talk to you.
He'll give you all the stories.
Right.
He'll give you the skinny on what's
these
going on.
right, the local Innsmouth type
Yeah.
are not going to give you the real, or
Nope.
any information. Really.
Nobody's going to tell you what's going on, but if you find this old drunk dude, he'll tell you everything.
And so he picks up some hooch,
Yeah.
and hoping he can ply him full of it and get him to talk, and he spills it. And and kind of like he's been hanging on to this for a while.
Well, it takes him a little while. It takes him a little
Yes.
while to get him going, because he's got
Half a bottle, at least.
Yeah, well, the narrator is worried about getting his return bus, so he's worried about time, and he's trying to get this guy talking. And it's, like an hour, he's hardly talking. Eventually, though, he starts to tell this tale, and what a tale it is.
And what a tale!
Well, he's looking out at the ocean, and
Yeah.
at the ocean, and about a mile out, is a reef.
Devil's Reef. Yeah.
Devil's Reef. So he looked at it, and all of a sudden he just starts shaking his head, and he turns around.
That's
and he
that's
says,
where
"That
all the
was-
trouble started.
That's where, right? And he starts his story.
So he's an old man, and he's telling the stories from when he was a kid.
Right.
In fact, he's even referring back to older people's stories that go back as far as War of 1812.
Yeah.
So you've got to get the history of the town from back then until now through him. And Old Man Marsh
Yes,
is
and
at the center of
Old
this.
Man Marsh is at the center of all this, and he seems to have some strange relationship with the reef or something going on the reef.
Right, and
Yeah.
the Marsh house is still nice, and it's the only business in town is some sort of gold refinery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
they
got
have
money.
they have two exports, fish and gold.
So they
Right.
have gold, and the fishing is great right out in front of
Of the reef.
Innsmouth and nowhere else
and
around.
everywhere else around the fishing's lousy except right there. The
And if you
fishing's
come
really
from
good.
out of town to do fishing in the area,
They scare you out.
You're not coming back.
That's right. They chase you out or kill you or something.
right? So what's up with that? Oh, scary cat!
Scary cat for the October theme here. So do you want to get right to it? What's up with the Marsh
Yeah,
Marsh makes a deal with these creatures that live in the reef, and
Right. Well, so
part of the deal.
he was a sailor,
Right.
and he experienced. I don't know where this island is that he's connected.
South Pacific or
Okay,
something,
South
yeah.
Pacific. Yeah, where
That's where I pictured it.
Right, where he saw this relationship between the islanders and
Some crazy cult.
something.
Yeah. Mhm.
Some crazy cult, and he was like, "You guys are praying." Well, he tells you guys are praying to the wrong God.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you pray to a God that's going to give a little return on your investment,
Yeah, it's
like
gonna
I've
give you
seen?
something.
Yeah, which was some gold and
Fish.
excellent
and fish.
fishing.
So apparently these creatures that live in the reef, and they live way down in the reef.
Yes.
And they sort of herd the fish into the area between the reef and the shore so that the Innsmouth fishermen get fish like crazy. And apparently the whole town stinks of fish. It's
Yes.
just fish smell everywhere.
Yeah, it's gross.
But it wasn't, it was more than just some strange underwater creatures doing this. These underwater creatures are some sort of perverted half man, half fish kind of beings. And there's also stories about interbreeding between the townsfolk and these fish-like things.
Yes, and so that little by little sort of leaks out why these fishy characteristics are associated with the Innsmouth look.
Exactly.
So yes, so it's sort of like any child. You sometimes you look more like your mom, and sometimes you look more like your dad.
Yeah.
And so some people have a more fishy look, and
although in this case it was almost as if you developed it over time.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was the transformation happened in older adults.
Yeah.
So that's why the bus driver at 35 can still drive a bus and pass for a human, even though he has very large feet and small hands and bulging eyes. You know, but he still looks enough to pass as a human.
And they get to a point somehow in this transformation where they start spending more and more time in the water.
That's right.
And then eventually they just go in the water all the time. And also,
and they spend a lot of time indoors when they start to look, particularly when they start looking like the creature of the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
They don't go out until it's dark. Then they test the waters a little bit, do some, there's an in-between stage before you just disappear.
yes.
Into the water.
Now the other benefit of being in this crazy fish cult thing is you live forever. Unless you're killed.
Exactly, but there's no natural causes.
Yeah. You don't die of natural causes. You can be killed, but you're just going to be immortal.
And right at the beginning of the story too, let's not forget that he talks about, he contacted the federal agencies that went over there, and there was even rumors that a submarine blew up the reef.
But that's later. That's foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's
Right.
talking about what happens later on.
Yeah. But it opens up, like the first couple of lines, right, is about how he called in the feds.
Yeah.
And the feds cleaned house in this place. But I got to tell you,
how it got
to that point.
That's right. So we know
he's
from the
telling
beginning.
that story.
We know from the beginning there's going to be a tragic end, but he's telling us how it got to that point, and how he learned about all this nasty stuff and what the reef was all about.
Right. So then Marsh took a wife and had some
wives.
kids.
Yeah.
And one of the daughters that didn't have any fishy qualities, they married her off to an Arkham man, and they don't know what happened to her.
Right. And his other wife, who looks horrible, is walking around with a strange tiara on her head, which matches a tiara that the narrator saw back in the original town, right?
Right.
There was one tiara that was
got him going,
there was one tiara back in the original town that he saw in the museum that the Marshes were always trying to buy back from the museum.
Because
but
they would
sell.
get this jewelry, this horrible looking jewelry, and just melt it down and sell it for the gold.
Yeah.
But here, so they had these reliefs that were sinister. Among these reliefs were fabulous monsters of abhorrent grotesqueness and malignity, half ichthic and half batrachian in suggestion, which one could not dissociate from a certain haunting and uncomfortable sense of pseudo memory, as if called up from image and from deep cells and tissues whose retentive functions are wholly primal and awesomely ancestral. So that's just how he writes. Everything's like that.
Everything is like that.
I mean, he's an amazing vocabulary and understanding of Egyptian myths and mythologies and
now,
for
one
a high school dropout.
One thing, speaking of his writing, that really annoyed me was when the old drunk was talking. You had this kind of language, but spelled to try to bring out his accent or something.
Yes.
And it was almost unreadable.
Yeah,
it was very difficult
was tough.
to get through.
And I don't know if you listen to that guy do the reading of it.
No.
Oh man, it was you're like, oh, that's exactly what he was trying to get out of this. And
I'm sure if you studied it for a while.
of rhythm and accent of sort of uneducated rural New England.
Yeah. If you try to read it, there's just so many misspelled words that you have to stop and think, like, what are you trying to say there?
Oh, I fussed. What's fussed? Oh, that's first with a New England accent.
Yes. I find it distracting when people try to write that way. So the kid the narrator, he's 19 or something, has his conversation with the old dude, and then it's time to go get on his bus. So he goes back into town, and the bus breaks.
But
down.
they're kind of disrupted by.
Well, the tide's coming in, and old man freaks out and runs off.
Yeah.
And is never seen again.
And is never seen again.
Yeah.
Maybe I think so. The implication is that he has shared too much with an outsider, and maybe the old man needs to go, and so does the outsider.
Yeah.
Who goes into that crummy hotel room.
Well, yeah, he goes into the hotel room because the bus broke down, so he can't get out of town.
Right.
And then he goes to the one terrible hotel room. He gets some meager dinner, and then goes into some room upstairs and locks all the doors.
Right.
And the story we heard in the beginning was of people in this hotel would hear strange sounds all night and all this. Well, he starts hearing sounds of a mass of people coming up the stairs, trying the doors, trying to get in from all sides into his room. So he's thinking, I've got to escape.
Yeah, he does the smart thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
At this point, you think of, well, does he just sit there and open the door and say, nothing's wrong or what? But no, he decides to.
He's going to get out. And so he thinks about getting out the window, but it's too long of a jump from his window to the top of this building. Right. So he goes through this elaborate ruse to try to get into like 2 rooms down, where he can jump onto the building, and barely, escapes barely.
All right, tries to stay away from the street. Now there's like an angry mob, pitchfork mob with torches.
Kind of a frog fishman.
Yeah, kind of a classic sci-fi thing where you have this big mob of shambling, zombie kind of thing. Like all these zombies chasing him down the road.
But these people look fishier than any of the people, even fishier than the people he's already seen.
And he's seeing more coming up out of the water.
There's some hopping, there's some slapping, there's some, there's a priestly-looking guy, priestly frog-headed guy with one of those tiaras on.
Yes, and a robe.
And fortunately, though, there had been, in the heyday of the town, there was a railroad that went to the town. So that is what he follows. He knows he can't take the highway. And so he follows this railroad out of town and does eventually make it.
Yeah, and it was the end, for whatever remains to me of my life on the surface of this earth, of every vestige of mental peace and confidence in the integrity of nature and of the human mind. Nothing that I could have imagined, nothing even that I could have gathered had I credited old Zadok's crazy tale in the most literal way, would in any way be comparable to the demoniac, blasphemous reality that I saw, or believe I saw. And he goes on like that for a while, but the horrible sight of these nasty forms vaguely suggested the anthropoid with their heads, they were the heads of fish with prodigious bulging eyes. Yeah.
Right, so now he's taking the whole thing in for what it really was. Okay, so the world is... Things like this do take place in the world.
Oh, that
is jacked up.
That's actually a good point to mention, because he has that. There's this quality to it where he starts off with, I'm a science guy and I only believe what I'm always looking for the naturalistic explanation for everything, and I don't go for these crazy woo-woo explanations, which is why he was willing to go to Innsmouth in the first place, because he didn't believe all the superstitious, scary stuff. And over the course of the story, he comes to realize, well, okay, and there is this craziness.
Right. Now, also,
but the story's not done, right?
No, the story's not done.
Right. So he's still getting he's still recovering, basically, from that experience.
He gets out, he goes back home, all that kind of stuff. He's recovering.
But the end is a few years later.
Yes. Yeah, and he's sitting around and starts to look in the mirror.
Yeah, but he looks a little bit more into his genealogy and finds an uncle, and finds a great-grandmother who actually came from where?
Yeah, Markham. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was a marsh. She was the
missing marsh.
daughter
of the marsh
who got married off.
And this is when he discovers that he is actually descended from these creepy things,
Yes.
and he starts to look in the mirror and see that he's starting to develop the same.
Right, and then the other thing is his uncle takes him to the bank and to the safe deposit box, and unwraps one of the tiaras.
Yes, exactly.
And he's like, "Oh my!" And that freaks him out.
Yes.
Freaks him out. He buys a gun, and like a lot of Lovecraft, I'm going, well, I guess he's just going to kill himself, because that's how a lot of Lovecraft, you see what the real world is like, and you're like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right.
But he changes his mind, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he says, wait a minute, I'm in.
I'm one of these guys. I guess I'm going back to Innsmouth. Yeah.
Yeah. And he decides that
Yes.
that's his destiny, and he's going
Yeah.
to be swimming with the fishes.
And not in the way that.
And he gets
Not
rather
the vodka.
excited about it.
Yeah,
There's
he's excited about it.
stupendous and unheard of splendors await me below, and I shall seek them soon. But the one thing you don't think about it is he was the one that called in the cavalry, so to speak,
strike.
to strike it. So, is there anything left?
Actually, it's a good question.
Right,
If he goes back, maybe they won't be there.
His Uncle Douglas is in the madhouse, and he's getting ready to shoot himself, and he changes his mind.
Yeah.
What's the last paragraph?
Oh, I was switching back over to the other story.
I shall plan my cousin's escape from the Canton madhouse, and together we shall go to Marvel's shadowed Innsmouth. We shall swim out to that brooding reef in the sea and dive down through black abysses to Cyclopean and many-volume Yathley. And in that lyre of deep ones we shall dwell in mist wonder and glory forever.
It's kind of upbeat in a creepy
Right.
way.
Did you notice how many times he used the word cyclopean?
Yeah, he loves that.
He loves that word. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear it a lot in Cthulhu.
Yeah. Actually, we need to get to Cthulhu because we're running a little on time here.
So he's the biggie. He's the Cthulhu is the Lovecraftian. If people have heard of the word Lovecraft, they've probably heard of Cthulhu. If they only know two things,
Yeah.
it's Cthulhu. So, and the pantheon of gods and monsters is often referred to as the mythos of Cthulhu.
Okay.
So that's why we got to do Cthulhu.
So the first story came in 5 chapters. This one's 3. The Horror in Clay, The Tale of Inspector Legrasse, and The Madness from the Sea.
Right, and it's an interesting telling of the story because it's 3rd, 4th, and 5th person.
Yes.
So it's right. So there are 3 sections of the story that form one story.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So we first find out about this where some guy has to administer the estate of his dead uncle or something who was a famous academic who died suddenly, although he was an old man, but he died suddenly. So he's going through his affairs and trying to get everything in order, and he finds this documentation that seems kind of odd, and he sees these different stories, but he also finds this goofy object, this little piece of clay that's been molded in a certain way. And he tracks that down to some young man who's been having dreams, and created this clay sculpture out of the images that he had in his dreams.
Right. And the important thing are the dates. It's this between March and April of 1925 that as he is digging. Well, maybe does he get all these scraps of paper from his uncle's collection before he meets the crazy student?
Actually, I thought the stories from the crazy student were written up in his uncle's documents.
But he comes across a number of events that take place around the world. Or is that the second
that's
section?
right. Yeah.
Right.
But it all take place at the same time when he's having these fever dreams.
Yeah.
Yes, let's get to Cyclopean again here. So his dreams of great Cyclopean cities of Titan blocks and sky-flung monoliths, all dripping with green ooze and sinister with latent horror. So he produces this little sculpture from his dreams.
Yes.
And what does he do? He takes the sculpture to have some other people look at it.
Right, he takes it to a conference down in like St. Louis, and he looked at it, and then he meets the inspector down there, right? Because the inspector is investigating an incident in Louisiana.
So it's a little confusing because you have all these different characters and all these different. But I think
stories
that's
taking places in different times and different locations.
Yes, but that's part of the point.
Yes.
Is that the same theme is cropping up in all these different places with all these different people. So first we learn about the professor and the young kid who has the visions, and he makes this sculpture, and then we find out about this police officer.
Right.
Right, but this is in 1908. So the original story takes place in 1925. So this goes way back. In 1925, this is when you had the outbreaks of mania around the world in Paris, London, Africa, South America, Haiti, the Philippines. Mobs, people just losing their minds in these different newspaper clippings. Mm-hmm. Then he comes across the tale of the Inspector Lagos, which goes back many, many years.
Right.
It just seems to sound a lot like...
He shows them the clay thing, and they go, oh, that's like this other thing.
That's like this other thing. And he's reading it, and he goes, wait a minute, this little statuette that they're talking about in this... Because he's not in this story. He's reading the story of many, many years earlier. He goes, wow, that sounds a lot like this statue that this...
Yeah, so that's the first indication that something crazy is that it's not just a matter of crazy dreams, that this guy, what he dreamt and molded from clay turned out to look just like this actual object that somebody else found when the police raided this strange cult in Louisiana.
Right, so there are like homeless squatters living out in the woods going, there's something really weird going on out here, guys. Yeah. So they go in there pretty well armed.
And it's not in the woods. It's like in a swamp.
Yes, it's right. This is Louisiana. Yeah,
Louisiana swamp, and it's disgusting. I mean, it sounds like they're having to wade through the muck and the mud, and then they come to this raised area, and there's some crazy cult-like orgy weird thing going on.
Yes,
with all these bodies, naked bodies writhing around, and this big monolith.
With a statue on top, and I'm thinking this is going to be the monolith at the base of it is large.
Yeah,
and then it's kind of anticlimactic. Then you get up there, and the statue's like a foot.
Yeah, so you have this great big monolith, and the little object, the little 8-inch thing, is sitting on top, and that's this thing that looks just like the thing the guy carved in clay. And
Do we have a good description of it?
Yeah, it represented a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and forefeet, and long, narrow wings behind. This thing, which seemed instinct with a fearsome and unnatural malignancy, was of a somewhat bloated corpulence and squatted evilly on a rectangular block or pedestal covered with undecipherable characters.
Nice.
Yeah, and the other odd thing about this little object was that the stone that it was carved out of was not from the earth.
No.
Like
geology.
And they ran past all kinds of people who were familiar with ancient languages and hieroglyphics and stuff like that, and they're going, nothing.
Yeah, we got nothing on the language, we got nothing on the stone, we got nothing on the thing that's carved on it. It's just everything about it is a mystery. And then there's this strange phrase. Does anybody want to try to pronounce this?
I've heard people do a really good job at it, but I wouldn't even try.
Yeah, it's a bunch of crazy words thrown together, and the most important ones are Cthulhu Relay.
Yeah.
But translated into English, it supposedly means, in his house at Relay, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming.
Right. So they arrest a bunch of these cult members, and only one guy, old Castro, is the only guy who's willing to talk to him, and even he doesn't give him much, but he does at least give him that
English translation, right? And another strange thing about this story is they find this weird group of people in the Louisiana swamp, and then they also something about these Eskimos who had the same kind of.
Yeah, so another right. So at this conference or whatever, so another professor of anthropology, he says, there was a similar phenomenon in 1860. A tribe of degenerate Eskimos, I guess it's in Greenland, right? Formed some sort of devil worship. with deliberate bloodthirstiness and repulsiveness. So there's been this cult,
And it pops up.
And it just pops up from place to place.
that's all over the world. It's very old,
And it seems to have strange origins. Seems to have like outer space origins. And it seems to pop up in people's dreams.
yes.
And I guess that's related to Cthulhu waits dreaming. You know, it's like maybe there's some relationship between Cthulhu's dreams and the dreams that people have about Cthulhu.
Yes, and he's old Castro in jail says he's kind of explaining the deal that these great ones came from before mankind.
Yeah.
They've been here all along.
They worship, so they said, the great old ones who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea,
Right.
but their dead bodies had told their secrets in dreams to the first man, who formed a cult which had never died.
There you go. Yes,
Right.
and they're hoping to awake the dreaming and sleeping Cthulhu, right?
Right.
Because I don't know how much fun this sounds, but this is what they're hoping for: that the liberated old ones would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. Okay.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's a pretty awful freedom.
Yeah.
So that jumps us to the next story.
Yeah, the
Right.
madness from the sea.
Right, the Norwegian.
Right. So then the
Crazy
then
Norwegian. He tracks down.
the narrator, now he's not even, he's done looking for all of this. He's just helping a friend who's got some mineral rocks or something wrapped in some old newspaper.
Yeah.
And then he unravels this newspaper, and it tells the story about a boat
Yes.
that's harbored in Australia.
Right, it was coming from South America to Australia. Yeah, and like one boat coming from South America to Australia ran into this other boat that was derelict, right?
Right.
And there was some kind of a battle or something.
Well, they were trying to keep the people on the nut jobs on this boat were trying to keep the good guys.
Yeah.
I forget what the name of what each of these boats is called, because that'll be helpful if.
The Vigilant and the
Right.
Yes.
So they're
Vigilant
going. You know, don't go that way. Don't go that way. And they're like, well, now I kind of want to go that way.
Yes.
So there's a little battle. They sink. Their ship gets sunk. Right. They board the other ship.
Yeah.
Kill everybody.
Yes.
And now they have their ship. And is there another statue on this
Well, they end up
statuette?
they end up going to. Okay. So
Right.
that ship. There's only two people left on that ship, right? There's one. No, that's after they see the.
Yeah.
the thing
So
under
they
the sea.
find this loathsome island.
Yes. Which just sort of comes up out of the sea for some strange reason. And it is, once again, he uses his favorite word about the rocks. And
masonry.
it's covered with
A lot of
Cyclopean city, and it has it's covered with ooze and slime and
ooze. The angles are all wrong.
Yeah.
the geometry doesn't
Geometry
work.
doesn't. Things that are obtuse should be.
Not of this reality.
yeah. So they get onto this island and climb around, try to
They
find
climb
what's
around,
going-
and I don't have the line there. It says that a couple of sailors did what centuries of cult worshippers could not do. They pried open the door and woke the sleeping Cthulhu.
Yes. So Cthulhu comes out,
Yes.
and most of them.
He's awful.
Yeah, he comes out and we see Cthulhu, and then most of them die either from fright
Just
or
seeing it.
just seeing it, they die. Two guys escape, get back on the ship, and
Right, so there's
get away
a
from the
Swedish
island.
guy and another guy.
And the one guy is just like in a coma or something, and the other.
And Cthulhu slips greasily into the ocean and
Greasily, that's right.
comes toward them, and he figures he can't outrun him, so he turns around, he rams him.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. He can't outrun Cthulhu, so he comes back and he slams into it. That was actually an interesting passage.
Yeah,
if we can
because his
find that
head
one.
like splits open and then reforms or something.
Yes.
So it's like he's not even.
He's sort of
got
physical,
skin and
but not.
bones the way that we think of.
See, here it is. There
Reptiles.
was a bursting as of an exploding bladder, a slushy nastiness as of a cloven sunfish, a stench as of 1,000 opened graves, and a sound that the chronicler would not put on paper. Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Yes. But you're right, it doesn't kill him. It like splatters him into a million pieces, but then he comes back together.
And then just goes back to the island or back underwater.
Underwater, yeah.
And so so another ship finds this ship, tows in the dead crazy guy, the dead guy and crazy Swedish guy.
On the
Norwegian
Vigilant, right, yes. That's right. And then it gets reported to the Admiralty and everything, and they decide they were just nuts, and
right.
yeah, that's
Right.
kind of the end of that.
Yeah, and the young man, our narrator, traces this back, sees the article, goes to Australia, finds nothing of interest there, except to find out that the Norwegian guy went back to Norway. So he goes to Norway. And he just recently died, but left some papers behind.
That's right.
Written in English, so his
Yeah.
wife didn't even know.
Exactly. He wrote them in English specifically so that his wife couldn't read them.
Right.
Because he didn't want them to.
So so this is the.
Oh, another theme that runs through, is it this one or the other one, that anybody who finds out the secret of this gets killed.
Yeah. No, you're right, because that's why he figures he's not long for this earth, because now he knows, and that's why his great uncle was killed after being jostled by a nautical-looking Negro.
Whatever that means. Right. So shall I read the end part?
Yeah, let's do it.
Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, and what has sunk may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering cities of men. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that, if I do not survive this manuscript, my executors may put caution before audacity, and see that it meets no other eye.
Right. He doesn't even think that he should leave this.
He's afraid that if anybody looks into it, they're going to run into the same thing.
Right. They're going to run into the cult, and you just be better off not knowing.
Exactly. Well, that takes us back right to the beginning, where right at the very beginning he says, the most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. You're better off not knowing all this stuff.
Yeah. It's not right. We have a guy here who has put the pieces together, and guess what? Didn't go well for him, or his uncle, or the next person who finds out.
So don't do it.
What are you going to do with this information anyway?
Right.
Oh, gosh. Well, that was fun. Now, would you be surprised at all to know that that the man who lived his whole life in the ocean state hated seafood?
Oh.
Now, so all of his monsters are what? Slithery, tentacles, slimy.
Yes.
There's all of this disgusting fish smells.
Yes.
Right? So you can see that for him, what is horrible? That
fish.
disgusting, fishy...
Anything that comes out of the ocean.
Yes, slimy, scaly...
That's interesting.
Right?
That is interesting.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it does. All right. Well, it was very interesting. I'd never read Lovecraft before, and
it's creeped into popular culture. There, looking into he's shown up on The Simpsons, on South Park. There's
there's Lovecraft country, right? There's that show.
The Lovecraft
Samuel
Country
Jackson
series,
is part of it.
Yes, with what was his name from The Wire? Who's Omar from The Wire?
okay.
From The Wire.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
were there any movies made of the Call of Cthulhu? Were there any?
Though there's one that's seems to be pretty good. It's from 2005, and it's created like a silent movie. So it's black and white, a little bit jumpy, but I can't find it. And you can buy it for $20, but you cannot stream it anywhere.
But the director died.
Of course he did.
I made that up. I don't know if he died. All right. Well, that's HP Lovecraft and two very interesting stories. Yeah. If you want to get some lessons on how to write creepy, scary stuff, check out HP
The
Lovecraft.
first story, one of his earliest stories, is called Dagon, and it's like 6 pages long, and it's proto Cthulhu.
Okay.
It's sort of, I see. So he's mysterious discovering of underwater creepy stuff, and he says in the beginning of it, he says, probably going to kill myself when I'm done with this story, and then he runs out of morphine and jumps out a window.
All right.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Well, we're out of time here,
Yes,
so
we
here
are.
we go. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks
Right,
so much.
cheers.